when I think about these texts, I think it points first and foremost to the sons of David. This is a very prominent aspect of this part of scripture. And so, can you paint me a picture of what it would have been like to be one of David's sons at this point in history?
Just in a word, I think the best word is probably dangerous.
Mm.
The one thing that I think we take away from this story, and I think this is probably going to be a learning experience full of a bunch of surprises for a lot of people as we talk through a little bit and we camp a little bit on this particular story of, David's sons and their ambitions with regards to their father's legacy, with regards to the throne of his kingdom. So in a word, uh dangerous. And this is just part of the burden of being born into these positions of privilege within the ancient Near East. It was a cutthroat environment where power played the central role and infected family relationships on levels that most people just can't imagine. But Game of Thrones is certainly an apt analogy, I think, to draw when looking at what's happening in the court of the House of David.
So we're kind of seeing that it's dangerous at this point, especially for David's sons, the royal family. What are some of the things that point you to that conclusion?
One of the things that we have to look at right away, and just to give some background, if people haven't watched your last episode or are entering this story without much information or just from a sort of a Sunday school perspective of what this story is, after this is part of a larger cycle called the succession narrative, which appears starting in 2 Samuel chapter 11. This is the story of David's rape of Bathsheba and his murder of her husband Uriah. And so it starts there, and from that point all the way through to basically the end of 1 Kings chapter 2, where Solomon is finally installed as the king over all of Israel. This central theme seems to be the problems of David's sons, the problems they are creating for David in his household. Now, I think in many respects that's the strongly sanitized view that we see when we read this text, when we read these stories in our English Bibles without the benefit of knowing the original languages and without a strong sense of the cultural background to what happened in ancient Near Eastern royal circles in the question of succession when heredity played such a strong role. And not just that, too. There's one of the real keys to understanding these stories has to do with how the relationships of David's sons are construed to David himself. And it requires a really careful read of these things. Readers of these texts need to pay very close attention to who these guys were, not just, sons of David, but how. How did they come into, like, whose children are they actually? Plays a substantial role. And under what circumstances were they, were they born? And this plays a substantial role in understanding, what's really going on in the house of David.
Okay, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense because the David obviously had more than one wife, and he had there was political marriages. I believe his son Absalom was the product of a political marriage,
Yes, very
um,
importantly.
and so we see kind of maybe alliances that people would be drawing because of who's born to who and who is more related to who. Um, so it might be helpful then to start. Could you maybe go through who are the people at play in this, in terms of David's sons, the different alliances that people have? Um, who's at play in this story?
The story of David and his rise to uh, control the throne of Judah, the throne in Jerusalem, is part of this larger story of conflict with with what's presented as his predecessor. This is the first king of the so-called United Kingdom, and importantly, I'm of the opinion, as most scholars are, that the United Kingdom that was founded under Saul of Gibeah is a myth. There was no United Kingdom. I'm my tendency is to think that there is possibly some uh, indicators that the house of Saul, this this kingdom that David found himself, that this dynasty that David found himself in conflict with in these stories, maybe this was the much more powerful roots of the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel,
Mm,
the kingdom of Samaria, that we know from history, starting quite a bit later, in the ninth century with Omri, who was the father of the much more biblically famous Ahab. Importantly, we don't know much of anything about the rise of this kingdom prior to Omri, but maybe we've got some clues about it when we read these stories of David and Saul. Could it be that Saul was, a progenitor of this northern kingdom and
mm.
was in conflict with David from the south? Now, that's a question I have. I don't have an answer for it. But the point I want to make is that that's sort of at the heart of this story, that this is a story predominantly about conflict and control in the house of David when confronting this other power, the house of Saul. So, and it's important to start. Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. So, with people that might not be familiar with at least biblical literature, um, we're looking at, Israel, right? So, um, we have at least according to scripture, like the people of Israel who came from this person named Jacob, also known as Israel in the other tradition. Um, and he had 12 sons who are the
Mm-hmm.
12 tribes of Israel. And all the way through, we see kind of a through line of generation to generation to generation until we get to um, what you're referring to, which is this person named Saul, who comes from the lineage or the tribe of Benjamin, one of the 12 sons of Israel. And so he becomes king over supposedly the united
Mm-hmm.
people. And then David sort of comes in and becomes the next king after that. Then his son, Solomon, becomes king. And after the third king, this is what you're referring to, which is we
Yes.
see a split in the nation. So there's the northern kingdom of Israel, and they would be what people might refer to as the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Although are they lost? There's a lot of speculation there, and you'll probably get into some of this too. But and then we have the other kingdom, which is the southern kingdom of Judah. And so what you're saying though is that this northern kingdom, that Saul wasn't in charge of a united kingdom, but he was
No.
in charge of just the northern kingdom, and David was maybe trying to establish his own kingdom, or were they already separate? I guess, what are you referring to here?
I think, and that's a question that I'm currently raising myself,
Mm.
right? Is how do we understand the dynamics of the establishment of these two kingdoms? Was there, and how far back can we even take some of this stuff? I'm toying with this idea that the House of Saul was sort of the origins of this. Maybe there was only one kingdom in the region that identified themselves with what we now consider to be Israelite culture and heritage. The House of David, which is what the southern kingdom in Jerusalem becomes, maybe it was born out of this conflict and this competition with the much more powerful, much more well-established group in the north, and maybe it put a scare in the strength of this northern kingdom. So these are all still ideas that I'm toying with, and I could be totally wrong about this. It could be that the Saulites were always just concentrated and centered in this southern kingdom, in and around what came to be the kingdom of David in Jerusalem, but which were then polemicized as Northerners, just because that seems to be one of the things that the biblical writers want to do, is
Mm-hmm.
to legitimate the the primacy of Jerusalem by denigrating
Yeah.
the Northern Kingdom.
This is a piece of a larger conversation that I had. You can watch the full episode by clicking here, or listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever you listen to podcasts by searching for Truth and Tradition. I'll see you guys there.